Heyo everyone, how are you today? Let me know down below and welcome to a little special video. It's going to be a two-parter. This first one being my top 5 games of 2022 and the next one is going to be my most anticipated games. That one's going to be a little bit shorter. But I also wanted to do a slight update and also a thank you. The update being we're going to probably finish some old projects as well as getting a bunch of new more varied playthroughs on the channel. Like I want to get Alan Wake done. I'm sorry, not done, but on the channel as well as a few other things and finish like Metroid Prime. Long story short about that one, I have mentioned it before and on stream, but I lost footage and it's very hard for me to not be able to bring you guys that like first time experience if I were having a first time because I would always get halfway through that game and not finish it because it was so good. But I finally got past that, got to the Omega Pirate, got the Phazon suit and all of that stuff, but then I ended up losing that footage and it's been I feel like I can't give you guys what you wanted, which is the first time really seeing that stuff again, but I really need to get over that hurdle because it's happened before and I want to be able to bring you guys some other stuff that, both I've either already started or things I just want on the channel in the first place. I think that having playthroughs of stuff that I care about that I don't already have done is great, even if it's just for me sometimes. But I also wanted to thank you guys for over 600 subscribers and all the support with the long plays and the streams and everything, and all that stuff means a lot. Really does. I know I may not reply to every single comment. Sometimes I just heart it because of my anxiety problems, but seriously, even doing this is hard for me because I'm not a very good speaker, because of the anxiety issues. But again, all this and all this growth on the channel, everything, sharing your stories, experiences with me. I know some of you have even mentioned that I've helped you in tough times, and I'm always rooting for all of you more than I root for myself. But again, thank you very much. And I'm hoping this year will be great for all of us. I really hope you've had a great holiday, whether you celebrate Hanukkah, Christmas, don't celebrate anything, whatever. I hope you've had a great month and a good start to your year. And I hope you have an amazing year. But let's start with the top 5. The first 2 are kind of more special things. The other 3 are pretty big for me, though. But the first 2 are kind of more, they're here because they meant something to me. So first up on the list is going to be weirdly Kirby and the Forgotten Land. So obviously it's extremely child oriented. It's very easy outside of some side content toward the end, some excuse me, very extracurricular stuff, especially like the stuff with Morpho Night. So I've always been a pretty casual Kirby fan. I enjoy the games, but Renee, who is a wonderful person that we love very much and are extremely thankful to have in our lives, is a huge Kirby fan. And I guess I'm one of the only people, and Cora and I are one of the only people in her life that actually likes Kirby. I definitely don't like Kirby as much as she does, but she was so excited for this game and I thought it looked great and there is a lot to do and the levels are very fun. There's a decent challenge that gets presented in the end game content, but it is weirdly long. The mouthful mode stuff is a lot of fun. The music is great. The boss fights are fun. And I just had a great time. And again, Renee is truly one of our closest friends. She's family. Much like David is my brother, he's family. We love those two greatly, but there was some, I think this was the first big thing I streamed with Renee that was like new and not just me showing her something or vice versa. And we had so much fun. But Renee is a huge integral part of our lives. And I don't I don't want David to think that he's not because he absolutely is. But Renee's done a lot of stuff for the channel and on the channel. And that means a lot to me. And I don't know if I've ever made my appreciation clear. I know I have with my brother, but Renee, I know you'll end up seeing this. We love you a lot, so much. You are family. You've done so much to us. Sorry, to us. You've done so much for us and for the channel, especially. You've given Corin more confidence and a really, truly great friend, and the same can be said of me as well. But getting to play this with you and seeing how much you loved it and getting to do it on the channel was great. And obviously, the game was actually great too. It was fantastic. It was very fun. Boss fights are great. There were great surprises. It was a big love letter to the franchise. Music was awesome. All that stuff I said earlier. But I got to experience it with you, and I really wasn't thinking of doing. I was gonna do top 3, but I was thinking about it, and I kind of think that number 5, which is Kirby, and number 4 is something else, are kind of more of like a special situation due to a friend or a loved one and playing it with them. So these are kind of honorable mentions, but I still think Kirby is a great game and number 4 is a great game. Kirby, I'd argue is actually a better game than number 4. I'm just not the biggest Kirby fan in the world, but I had a lot of fun playing this with Renee. And again, she has done so much for us and is such an integral part of our lives. And it's such a wonderful individual herself. I'm so proud of her and love her so much. I have her Etsy and her other, I forget what else it is, linked down below. She's done art and stuff for the channel, graphic design stuff, and helped me a lot. But she definitely could use more love on in every way. Even though she's a very happy individual and has a lot of very good friends and even still and sells stuff on Etsy all the time. She just deserves the world. She's one of the greatest people we've ever met, and if there's anything I could ever do for her, I always will do whatever I can. She is seriously too nice is the only way to put it, and that's why I kind of honorable mentions for 5 and 4. But Kirby and the Forgotten Lands, whatever, was such an experience with her. And this past year, we her, Corn, and I all grew much closer as like a group, as friends, whatever. And I really would not feel right if I did not include Kirby and the Forgotten Land in this list. So again, kind of more of an honorable mention, but number 4 for me was Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, because it does a lot of things that I like from, technically it's more of Neo, but I haven't really played Neo, so it's a Souls game kind of. It did a lot of things that I really enjoyed. It was this goofy action game that I got to play with one of my best friends who I don't get to spend as much time with as I would like, partly due to the distance. It's just one of those things. He does not live around where I live at all. We live states apart. But Jordan, or Roleplay as he's linked down below in any of the stuff that we do together, is probably the only friend I have that is super in love with the Final Fantasy franchise. So him and I had a great time with this game. And we agreed with its weaknesses. We definitely thought that some of the graphic issues could have been fixed. Some of them look really goofy. It doesn't have to look amazing or anything, but there's just something going on in certain stuff, that looks kind of rough. I didn't mind it in game, but there were issues here and there. But being able to do the weird things with the builds, essentially always being a blue mage with the soul parry, was so fun and goofy. The story, I think, weirdly enough, if they had actually spent more time on it and gotten a more talented writing staff, no offense to them, of course, because there's great ideas there. If the story had been executed better, it actually could have been extremely sad. And it was still sad at one point in particular, but it just could have meant more and been more. But just playing the whole game through, and a lot of the DLC, sadly, we didn't get to finish. But that's, again, different schedules, and we've just both been so busy. It is what it is. We had a great time. Like, again, honorable mentions. I really didn't think there were exactly 5 games this year that I would consider these like, wow, these are like the creme de la creme, my favorite shit of 2022. But these were honorable mentions because they were very good games and they were fun. This one is more of an 8 out of 10. Kirby's like a 9 or a 10. It's actually just a fantastic game. But this game had so much goofy stuff in it. It was kind of a perfect game for Jordan and I. We just had an extremely fun time. Did very different builds that actually balanced off one another weirdly well. We just had a great time. Some of the boss fights were legitimately super fun, and I don't think any of them were inherently like not fun necessarily. All the boss fights were fun, but going through the game with him was an experience I will not forget. I love Jordan so much, and he's also one of the genuinely nicest people I've ever met, and he deserves all the happiness in the world. So I wish we had time to play the DLC. It's not, excuse me, it's not, due to him or anything like that. It's just literally conflicting schedules, and we're both very busy. Maybe we'll find some time this year. Hopefully, I would love to spend more time with him, and I can't wait to talk to him about the stuff that's going on in Final Fantasy 14, because him and I adore Final Fantasy 14 so much, and can't wait to talk to him about Final Fantasy 16. But for now, we had a great time with this. We were able to beat it together, completely spoiler free, even though we kind of predicted what was going to happen. It was kind of obvious, but we just had a great time with Stranger of Paradise. There was just a lot of goofy build stuff you could do, and I'm not normally a big crazy heavy axe dude like I right here, but I fell in love with this like dark tyrant or dark sage stuff that I was doing. Had an insanely fun time with it. The ripping my own health apart but getting it all back was so fun, and we just had a great time, and I really wish we had more time for the DLC. But even part of it is that the DLC is very time consuming. Also, they kind of did this thing where they kept introducing difficulties, I guess, and it was required to go through them. But I still really liked the game overall. I gave it an 8 out of 10. I think he did as well. And I kind of hope we get a sequel that improves upon the things that we had problems with, and we get an even better game to play together at some point. So this is a bit weird because God of War Ragnarok is number 3, only for very personal reasons, because it is a better game than number 2 on the list. But God of War Ragnarok, man, what can I say that hasn't been said already? A visually stunning game, crazy fidelity with the graphics, the animations, everything looks and sounds so good. The story, the boy and dad of boy, father and son was, I don't want to say it's better than 2018, but there's a lot of payoff, right? And you can't really have one story without the other. But a lot of the stuff that there's these huge moments between the two, huge payoff, man. Absolutely. I mean, brought me to tears because Kratos, has done horrible things, but he wants to move past those things and be better. Maybe he can never make them right, but he can be better. He can make better things happen, and he loves his son. So there was a lot of really strong, powerful things, and even the scenes with Faye, with his wife, were so insanely moving. Spouse stuff gets me really bad because of my relationship with my partner, but we don't even spend time with her. There's not really a game with her, and those scenes messed me up. They're extremely moving. The acting is perfect. The show and not tell is still here from the previous game. Most of the time, characters don't just tell you everything. Even Atreus, who is more open than Kratos, doesn't just tell you everything. Even Thor, and in surprisingly sad parts, you get to learn a lot about him through a few things he says and how he behaves and how drunk he is in one scene. One thing I got to give this game a lot of credit for, outside of the fact that it had really fun puzzles, which is actually impressive for them to have as many as they did and be as fun as they were, the combat is just better. Like, it took a while for me to think that it was better because it felt very samey. Outside of doing stuff like this, it felt kind of safe, but it progressively got very wild. It got insane about halfway through the game. Stuff starts happening, even with Atreus being playable. Wasn't That was a great addition, but he's pretty straightforward and simple, just visceral, fast, and fun. But they start giving Kratos more stuff, and Atreus more stuff, and Freya becomes an NPC companion. It starts getting pretty nuts, man. And I mean, even just the one new weapon with Kratos is a huge difference, but tying that with all the smaller changes like holding triangle or mashing it for certain abilities, and because the runic attacks, I don't think they changed very much outside of literally giving new ones to, like for the spear. I don't even remember if there were any new ones, but the stuff with builds, the holding triangle, the ledge attacks, the jump attacks, all that stuff, it was smaller changes aside from the builds, but combining that with a new weapon for Kratos and a new companion that actually behaves differently and does different things ends up making the game much more fun. And there's going to be people definitely that prefer the original. I don't prefer either one. I think this is like a 10 out of 10. It is the continuation of another 10 out of 10. It's fantastic. There is hilarious writing, despite keeping its tone. There are truly, just amazing boss fights. And I can't stress enough when I say amazing boss fights. God of War 1, I think it was, 2018, was mostly Baldur and the dragon. Both of Baldur's fights, amazing. The dragon fight, so fun. But outside of the the mechanical side of the Valkyries, I don't really remember most of the other bosses, because not that they were bad. They were fantastic. But the balance of spectacle and actual mechanics in this game of the bosses, in my opinion, was definitely just better. It helps that the mechanics of the game are improved upon and better, but the bosses are insanely fun throughout. Even if the final boss may not be as much of a spectacle, I think it was deliberate. I enjoyed it a lot. Ragnarok is a fantastic game, and again, the only reason it's not number 2 is just for very personal things. But you cannot go wrong with a game. If you like the other game, you're gonna love this game. It's fantastic. There's so much to do, weird builds you can do, just absolute wild game with weirdly fun puzzles to do. But they're a big issue is definitely the NPC companions kind of telling you how to solve the puzzle way too quickly. Hand holding is fine to some extent. Like when I hit stuff that the spear needed but didn't have the spear, and they're like, hey, come back to this later. That's great. Don't make me waste my time, right? However, I look at a puzzle for 10 seconds and then somebody says something about how to do it or spoils the puzzles. Come on. But outside of that, I mean, the only other issue I have with Ragnarok, honestly, the only other problem is it does sort of feel like there should have been a middle game sometimes. I don't think that the pacing was bad, but there's some moments that, like with Freyr, with the guy that I forget his name, but the Wanderer, I think they were called, or the Traveler, that jumps off the thing in Vanaheim and yells for Vanaheim. Self-sacrifice is still powerful and strong. Could have meant more, but I get it because this game is mostly about Kratos, mostly about Atreus, and even surprisingly about Freya, who was actually a huge standout in both games. I loved her a lot in both, and I can't wait to see where they go with that stuff. But fantastic game. I haven't even 100% it myself yet. I want to, but it is a lot. They really added a lot of side content. They made the game more lived in, more beautiful, more fun. It's just, are you going to pretty much the way that I look at this game is, you prefer the more personal side of the game or the more crazy side like this one? I don't personally have a preference. I think that they're both amazing games. Even if it's not the same gameplay style as God of War anymore, I get why they did it for what, 6 games. So, and I loved all those games. I'm pretty much a long time, a very long time fan of the franchise. This was a complete accidental glitch, by the way, and it's like 1 in a million. It was very funny, but just amazing game with a great twist to it too. Still has this personal side of Kratos and Atreus, despite the obviously more epic, spread out world-ending terror or consequences and event that is Ragnarok. Just all around a fantastic game. I think they're completely equal, even if this game is technically better in a lot of ways. I do think that as a core, they're better. They really improved on the linearity in some areas. Like, some of it's not a bad thing by any means, but it just felt a little less linear sometimes. There's just more to do, and I mean that endearingly. And it was fantastic. I really loved this game, but it would have been number 2 if it wasn't for the fact that number 2 did a lot of things for me on a very personal level that kind of just made it my personal number 2 game of the year. So again, even though God of War Ragnarok is definitely a better game than Sonic Frontiers, it does a lot for me in a very personal level, that kind of makes me have to give it number 2. And if number 1 wasn't as good as it was, I would personally still make this number 1. But the game has some issues and it could be better. So there's definitely some things that hold it back for me. But on a personal level, they did so many things that I was not expecting and was a lot better than I was hoping it would be. One of those is that Sonic controls well, like super well. It's crazy. I cranked all of the, and you can even relatively emulate momentum. There's obviously caps to, certain levels of speed he has, but you can kind of set when he gets to those caps, which I like. There's just that when you're not holding boost, he has a pretty low cap, and when you're boosting, he's got a pretty high cap. But you can kind of emulate it even in the game itself without mods, which is really cool. And there really is some momentum in the game, but again, it's very minor, and you would have to do some settings to, make it function properly. But the fact that he controls this well, despite how fast he is, and he gets insanely fast, is kind of a triumph to me. I was not expecting it. He controls fantastically, and the homing attack being able to be done from the ground is great. The camera being as open, and you can really zoom out the camera too, is like another one of those, like, I was not expecting that, and it's great. You can put it in closer if you really want to. Even though I gotta admit, the combat is very fun, it's just a little simple. It's more fun to fight the, Guardians and the Titans. One thing they could definitely improve upon in that, because I like the stuff they had going, and the fact you can cancel out of everything. If they ever could, they should hire a guy that worked on Devil May Cry combat, because I think that if they made the more general enemies just honestly more aggressive and surround you more, and just there's more to do, because you can already cancel out of everything. Cancel into parry, you can cancel all your attacks into it or into, dodging. I think that they could really figure out some crazy stuff. I think that one thing that would be a really cool idea, maybe you could air dodge into like some kind of drop dash or something. I don't know if you can technically do that, but I mean more fluidly. If there is an existing version of it, it's not exactly the most fluid thing in the world. Like, it works. I would love for them to improve that stuff. But the stuff that they did really well, again, on a personal level, the controlling of the character. There's so much music, it's insane. The characterization of everybody and the writing of them are perfect. His Sonic's relationship with everybody is perfect. I was weirded out at how good that stuff was. Him interacting with Tails, Knuckles, and Amy is so good that it hurts my soul in the best way possible. You know, they just they get it. It was authentic. They care about each other and they're goofy. And it meant a lot to me. Even if the game, I gave it an 8 out of 10. It was a lenient 8. It's not perfect by any means, and it's not as good as God of War Ragnarok. The game just does a lot for me and makes me so happy. The boss fights are absolute insanity. Even if, like Gigano, for instance, is a very obviously a tutorial boss because he really doesn't do that much. But the visual spectacle, the stuff you can actually do to them, and the extra little like QTE things you get for the parries. I agree the parry system should definitely be harder. I think because you can just hold it, it's kind of goofy. But man, there's just so much that they could do, and they did a lot. Like there's a lot. The open world is very fun. There are a bunch of crazy things you can do with it, as well as weird momentum stuff that is kind of apparently intentional. It's just, and it's very polished overall. Like it's open world, so there's some issues here and there, but it's the most polished Sonic game in a while. I mean, Lost World was, I guess, pretty polished overall, but that was still a while ago. I don't know. It's a great game. I really enjoyed it, and I just want more things to do, more open world stuff, because it was already a very rewarding, the poppin' is an issue for sure, but it was a very rewarding experience where you just sort of find these weird, excuse me, these weird little platforming challenges everywhere. Obviously, like Sonic, platforming is not exactly the hardest thing in the world, but they're scattered all over the place. And, I got over how they looked eventually because they just kind of catch my eye, and that's just how the levels in Sonic games look anyway, more or less. And you would find a thing, do a thing, get a power up, Cocos, get XP, keys, whatever, every single time you do that stuff. And it will launch you to another thing or a secret or an island mystery or an Elder Coco or a level or whatever. And it was just designed to launch you to these things. And don't get me wrong, that aspect of it could be better, but first attempt doing all this stuff, they did it pretty well overall. I was actually impressed and surprised, and this felt like a big love letter to the franchise and to the fans, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, the cyberspace levels are really fun with some crazy speedrun techniques. The only issue I have with them is Sonic does feel weird sometimes, don't get me wrong. When you aren't doing the speedrun stuff, he feels kind of stiff and slow, but during the speedrun stuff, he feels wild, right? But in the 2D sections, he feels really sluggish. Those are like the weakest part of the game, in my opinion. Just very odd feeling and weird. But again, the reason it's number 2 is because of the characters and the way that they were written and how well everything was overall. And it's completely biased. I'm not going to lie to you. It's total bias, total personal. It just did everything that I wanted and more in a package that I wish as a whole was better. But there's a lot of very extremely personal things that happened that just push it over the edge for me, and it's one of my favorite Sonic games, honestly. And I really can't wait for the DLC, and I cannot wait to see what they do next, because I love Frontiers, and even replaying it with that level 1 run, I was a little worried about replayability, like the process of elimination, so to speak, with your objectives. And I actually it was better. It just felt like I had an excuse to do everything again, and I don't know, it just felt refreshing because there's so many of these little, things all over the place. I didn't do them all, and there were a few I didn't do, and when I got to do some of them on the other playthroughs. So it definitely has, a slight issue with longevity. I think they should add more things to do overall. But what's here is done with love and mostly a lot of care and respect. And I really enjoyed it. So don't get me wrong, there's definitely bias as to why it's number 2. But God of War Ragnarok is a fantastic game, and it was going to be on my list no matter what. It's just that this did some stuff for me on a very personal level that it just kind of pushed it above and beyond for me. So I am a fan of the Souls games. I don't think I'll ever really do content on them, on the channel. I don't think I will. And it's partly the fan base. It's partly that they're really special games. Maybe one day. Maybe one day I will. But I'm only okay at them, and the community can be kind of weird sometimes about people who aren't really, at least decent at the game. But Elden Ring has so much going on. in all of the strengths of a Souls game put into this crazy open world that is so seamless and in and of itself is a giant Souls level. And inside of these freaking, this giant, like literally a giant map that is a Souls level, inside of that are a bunch of Souls levels. There are so many moments in that game where I was like, holy crap, I'm here, even more so than usual. I couldn't even tell you how cool the boss fights are. I couldn't, I pretty much 100%ed the game. I got the platinum trophy. I missed a few dungeons, I think, the side dungeons, right? But dude, the weight of everything, the exploration, the level of building your character, and even making your own story in the journey that is to, become the Elden Lord, or in my case, to bring about the Age of Stars, just, it was so much. It was too much. I don't think I've ever played a game that gave me 150, 140 hour playthrough in my first playthrough that was not like, I don't even know. No, I just don't think I have. I don't think I've ever had a first playthrough last that long. And I know that there's games that are even longer, types of JRPGs, but I don't normally play JRPGs that are that long. My traditional JRPG length is probably anywhere between 40 to 80 hours. I don't think I've ever had a playthrough last more than 100 plus hours on any game for a first playthrough. And it's because I did almost all of that stuff just as blind as I could, and just having a wild time, enjoying it. I would just sit there experiencing it all, and I turned like the fan off in my room and turned the TV up. I wanted to hear everything. All the characters were beautifully small but large. It's hard to explain, and I've never been good at putting my thoughts to voice. I probably should have wrote some of this stuff down, but I wanted to give you guys my honest, immediate thoughts about 2022. But the story, the how dark and how fantastical it all was in Elden Ring was so wild. One of my favorite things, I'll give you guys the sort of experience and the thought process that happened to me. So obviously I was in love with the Ronnie storyline. It's a pretty popular one. A lot of people really enjoyed it. Pretty much one of the only things that I Googled, because I was kind of nervous about something, was kind of just about like, do I get locked out of stuff if I do this? If I do this thing, do I get locked out of other things? And the only thing that I really figured out through that was that I had to be really careful about the frenzied flame. And that was pretty much it. But I did find out in that process that getting that will actually spare Melina if, once you get to this juncture. And I had pretty much got there. Like, I was already near the fire giant and everything when I bothered to Google this, because I got kind of scared of some stuff. And I found out, oh, you can save her with this, right? Is there a way to get rid of it? So in my first playthrough, I don't know if I would have gone to fight, oh god, her name is escaping me, even though I literally have a statue of her. Melania. I don't know if I would have fought Melania or the one dragon that I can't even remember the name of it. The dragon that you essentially travel through time to defeat because it was lost to time, and the Farumazula Parthanau. No, I cannot remember the thing's name, but I don't know if I would have done those two extremely optional, pretty hidden challenges if it wasn't for the fact that I found out there was this absurd way to save an NPC, because I kind of grew attached to her, because that's part of what these games do. You're, the maiden, so to speak. One of my favorite characters in Bloodborne was literally the doll. I just really love the quote-unquote maidens of Bloodborne and Elden Ring. So yeah, I eventually was like, okay, well, I don't want her to die. And even though I'm normally would not do this much in a Souls game on a first playthrough, I have to. And I kind of formed it as this weird story where my character found out about it, and he went on to absorb the frenzied flame to spare her, even if it meant, losing her, even if it meant that she would hate him, because that is kind of what happens in that sequence of events, right? And then I went through the Farum Azula, however you pronounce it, to fight that guy, the crazy dragon dude who was insanely cool with the red lightning in the middle of the eye of the storm, back lost in time. Then went on to the Halig tree to go and fight Melania. And after all of that, I just I wrote my own story practically with the things present to me in the game, you know, because I saved her, but then was able to purge myself of the frenzied flame and continue on and then do the Age of Stars ending. Because there's that debate about whether or not is the Age of Stars actually resetting the world? Is it just taking the power of gods away from the land and putting it somewhere else so that it's less corrupting to everything? It's been a while since I played the game. I played it the one time. I loved it so much I kind of never want to play it again. That's just what I do. But it stuck with me. The world was so well designed, so beautiful. The art direction carried it so heavily. The quests were amazing. I did pretty much all of them. I did the Dung Eaters. I did Fia's. I can't even remember her name, but there's like a girl that you can find her with a wolf, and you can bring her all the way to the northmost of it, right? And you find like a matured version of her species or whatever race she is, and you sort of give her spirit to them to guide or watch or whatever. Radahn was amazing. I mean, you have to pretty much fight Radahn if you're going to do Ronnie's quest line, and that's the ending I got. But I checked out everything I could. I did everything that I could. This was one of the best moments of the game. In fact, I'm just watching these trailers while I talk about it. The song, the fight here, my God. But I will never forget. There's another one I mentioned. I will never forget when I first got to the end of the game. Hoaraloo was so fun to fight, don't get me wrong, but there was something about the weight of this scene, actually, when Radagon appears and the theme kicks in and his body is like his like insides are like the Elden Ring. Even if the Elden Beast could have been a better final boss, it wasn't terrible by any means, it blew me away. Absolutely insanity. I don't know how else to put it into words, but Elden Ring is my game of the year because of not only the creative build horse shit that you can do, but the world and the fact that everything was interconnected. Like when you find cutscenes in these games, this has always been the case, but I felt it even more strongly in Elden Ring. There's so much weight to a cutscene. It feels like a reward, but you're also like, oh shit, here we go. It's time. And there's something about the weight of that scene when Marika falls and becomes Radagon and he, gets ready to fight you into the Age of Stars ending that just like I can't even put it all into words. I'm not going to review the game for you because obviously, if you liked the game you or wanted to play it, you already played it. So that's just what it is. And a lot of people played this game for considering it's a Souls game. It's always been popular, but not this popular. But yeah, I it's my game of the year. And it feels weird to say that over a Sonic game that did so much for me personally. But this game changed how I'm going to look at open world games, and it's one of the only ones that was this overwhelming that I actually completed because of that sense of like missing out, that I'm going to miss stuff. And because all the Souls games are obviously a bit inspired by Metroidvanias, Castlevania, whatever, in the sense of look around, find stuff. This game would give you extremely cryptic things, much like they normally do, but it's even more cryptic because it's open world. And that journey and finding all those things just blew me away. I would like to, excuse me, I would like to maybe start doing Souls content at some point, but I don't know. It's just something that the community kind of deters me from. Nothing against them. And I know there's plenty of good people in the Souls community, but every community has toxicity. Souls community is just pretty bad about it. But I can tell you this game was an 11 out of 10 critically for me. I mean, there were a handful of issues, but considering the grand scheme of everything, the occasional frame rate not being perfect was because it wasn't like running like completely awful, at least in my experience, didn't really affect it because the boss variety, the boss fights, the music, the world, the design of the world, the progression, the story, the make your own story level of it too. I mean, I basically got to craft my own thing where in his journeys he heard about what he could do with that gold. I think it was the golden alloy needle or whatever, to purge himself of the frenzied flame, but it was being guarded by Melania. And after fighting Melania, that he heard about her brother and went out, trying to search for him to see if I don't, I can't remember off the top of my head, but then having to fight Moog, the Lord of Blood or whatever. Just a fucking crazy experience. And you look, I could be as biased as I wanted about Sonic Frontiers because of the story stuff that it did and the character stuff that it did for me, but I can't put it past Elden Ring, which is crazy to me because it's Sonic, it's my favorite thing, but Elden Ring did so much for me. I like the best way to explain this is when I finally hit that final boss fight with Radagon slash the Elden Beast, when the theme kicked in, I got so excited. I was dead quiet the whole time, just wide-eyed watching this scene, right? And I already knew Marika was Radagon because I did the full quest line for like pretty much everything. So I also did the one with I can't remember his name, but the sun the sun dude, the holy dude, and the monk that was following him, where you find that out. But there was something about the weight of that scene and the theme kicking in that I felt it, and I rarely feel like that about anything, honestly. So it was just, I don't know how to explain the sensation that I had, the elation, the I almost had tears in my eyes from the pure joy and weight of the how is this game this fucking good? Because I knew this was it. The Elden Beast was a surprise, and unfortunately not exactly a pleasant one. Just wasn't as good as all the other fights in the game. Pretty much it, all the major bosses anyway. But that final experience, that climb back up the capital to I'm forgetting their names right now, but the seeker of knowledge guy, the smartest man alive dude, that tries to stop you, and then you fight Horalu Godfrey or whatever, and then you fight Radagon. Like, oh my god! And then you get this ending with Ronnie if you're a simp like me, and it is beautiful. It is powerful. And it is the end of this insane journey that I really truly wish I could fucking forget. That's why I don't want to play the game anymore. No playthrough, for me anyway, and I know not everybody's like this, will be as fun ever. So the more I forget, the better. But this is one of those things that it's not like, oh man, I haven't played Devil May Cry 3 in forever. Can't wait to play that with Renee, for instance. So awesome to revisit that game. So awesome to revisit 4. And even DMC, looking forward to revisiting with her. Going back to some Resident Evil games. But I can never go back to Elden Ring. I don't think I can ever play it again, except for when there's eventually DLC, because it was something truly special. To me, it was truly special to gaming, even if I do think they should change the engine. It's a bit old now, but they did a lot with that old engine, man. I mean, even this shot of Ronnie and the Age of Stars ending is so fucking cool. It is one of my favorite, if not my favorite game ever made. It's this or Final Fantasy 14 or Castlevania Symphony of the Night at this point. Absolutely amazing. And I think it's Elden Ring, because I can't get over how absolutely stellar the story, the world is, what you can do with the stuff that's presented to you, even in the terms of story. It's insane. And it was my game of the year, and it's one of my favorite games ever made. But that's it. So let me know what your guys' favorite games were down below. Thanks so much again for over 600 subscribers, for all the support on the streams and everything lately. I love you all so much, and I really do appreciate all of your comments. Again, even if I don't always reply, because sometimes I just can't. I just leave a heart on it. But again, I really appreciate it. I hope we have a great year. I hope you are having a great start to your year and had a great holiday season, whatever it is that you celebrate, Hanukkah, Christmas. If you don't celebrate anything, whatever, I hope you had a great month, and I hope you're going to have a great year. And I will see you guys next time. Love you all. Hope your dreams come true. Peace out, everyone.